First contact confusion. The Galactic Confederation vessel Unwavering Truth emerged from hyperspace with the precision of a mathematical equation, its crystalline hull gleaming against the backdrop of stars. On the command deck, High Emissary Zix-Arath of the Evolurians straightened his ceremonial mantle, 8 eyes blinking in sequence as the blue-green planet appeared on the main view screen. Earth, he said, the translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. How primitive it looks from here. First Officer Nail Vex chittered nervously, her exoskeleton shimmering slightly purple, a sign of anxiety among their kind. High Emissary, preliminary scans indicate the humans have prepared their orbital diplomatic station as requested. Station Freedom awaits our arrival. Zix-Arath clicked his primary mandibles in acknowledgement. This was routine for him. 400 cycles of diplomatic experience had taken him to 1,000 worlds. Humans were simply the latest species to join the galactic community, having been discovered only 3 standard rotations ago, when their primitive radio signals were detected by a Confederation outpost. Very well. Initiate docking procedures. His voice carried the weight of authority that came with being the Confederation's most decorated diplomat. And Nailvex, do control your coloration. We wouldn't want the humans thinking we're anxious. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human with rich brown skin and close-cropped black hair. The being wore a blue uniform adorned with various metallic symbols. Greetings, High Emissary Zix-Arath. I'm Commander Sophia Chen of Orbital Station Freedom. On behalf of the United Earth Alliance, welcome to human space. Zix-Arath performed the traditional greeting gesture of his species, pressing his upper right appendage against his central thorax. Commander Chen, I bring harmonious intentions from the Evalderi Collective and the Greater Galactic Confederation. We anticipate productive discourse. The human's face contorted into what the briefing materials identified as a smile, supposedly a friendly expression, though to Evalderi sensibilities, it looked disturbingly like a threat display. Zix-Arath suppressed a shudder. We've prepared Docking Bay 4 for your vessel, Commander Chen continued. Our gravity and atmospheric settings have been adjusted to Evalderi preferences according to the specifications you sent ahead. Most satisfactory, Commander. We shall complete docking procedures momentarily. As the view screen went dark, Zix-Arath turned to his aide, Trelmach, who was frantically scrolling through data on a holographic display. Well, the High Emissary demanded. Your assessment. Trelmach's compound eyes reflected the blue light of the display. The humans appeared genuine in their welcome, High Emissary, although their station's design is. He hesitated, puzzling. Their habitat sections are divided into numerous small compartments rather than efficient communal spaces. Primitives often have strange notions of spatial organization, Zix-Arath said dismissively. What about security? The Council is particularly concerned about their military capabilities. Scans indicate standard defensive systems, High Emissary. Nothing our technology couldn't handle. Zix-Arath chittered sharply. That is not relevant, Trelmach. We are here for peace, not to assess tactical advantages. The Evalderi Collective has evolved beyond such primitive considerations. The young aide dipped his head in apology. Of course, High Emissary. The ship shuddered slightly as docking clamps engage. Through the viewport, Zix-Arath could see the sprawling structure of Orbital Station Freedom, a chaotic assemblage of modules, solar arrays, and docking arms that lacked the elegant symmetry of Evalderi architecture. Yet there was something impressive about it, a certain resourcefulness that hinted at why the Confederation considered these humans worthy of diplomatic relations. The human delegation awaits us in what they call their welcome hall, Trelmach reported. Zix-Arath chittered softly, the Evalderi equivalent of a sigh. Very well. Remember your training. Observe everything, but reveal nothing beyond our prepared statements. These humans may seem primitive, but the Council suspects they are more complex than they appear. Yes, High Emissary. As the airlock cycled open, Zix-Arath composed himself. This was routine. Just another diplomatic mission to another unremarkable species. Engage in pleasantries, establish trade agreements, ensure they pose no threat to Confederation interests, then return to the comfortable familiarity of the collective. What could possibly go wrong? The formal welcome reception had been, in Zixarath's professional opinion, excruciatingly tedious. Humans apparently considered it necessary to introduce every single official on their station, 42 of them, each with their own incomprehensible title and an enthusiastic handshake that threatened to dislocate his delicate manipulator appendages. I require a moment of solitude to process the diplomatic overtures, Zixarath announced to his aide, which was diplomat speak for, I need to escape these chattering primates before I lose my mind. Trelmach nodded knowingly. Of course, High Emissary. Shall I inform the humans you are engaging in ritual contemplation? Perfect. That should buy me at least half a rotation cycle. Zixarath slipped away while Trelmach distracted Commander Chen with questions about Earth's atmospheric composition. The station's corridors were mercifully quieter than the reception hall. The High Emissary wandered aimlessly, allowing his secondary brain to process the diplomatic discussions, while his primary consciousness simply enjoyed the respite. The human architectural choices continued to baffle him. Why waste precious space on these recreational areas when efficient sleep pods would suffice? A sudden burst of high-pitched sounds caught his auditory receptors. Zixarath froze, his antennae quivering. The noise came from behind a large door marked Station Educational Facility. Authorized personnel only. Security concerns immediately flooded his mind. Was this some kind of weapons testing? A secret communications array? The sounds were unlike anything in the Evaluary database. Zixarath pressed his audio enhancement device against the door. The cacophony of shrill vocalizations continued, occasionally punctuated by a deeper, authoritative voice. This requires investigation, he muttered to himself, bypassing the simple electronic lock with a diplomatic override code. The door slid open, and Zixarath nearly collapsed from shock. Small humans, dozens of them, confined in a brightly colored chamber, arranged in neat rows, all facing a larger human who stood before a glowing information screen. Some of the small humans were restrained in chairs, while others frantically scribbled on primitive data tablets. Sweet mother of egg clutches, Zixarath whispered, his exoskeleton paling to a sickly yellow. They're breeding captives. The larger human, clearly some kind of overseer, turned toward the door. Her eyes widened at the sight of the tall alien diplomat standing frozen in the doorway. High Emissary Zixarath, this is unexpected. I'm Miss Patel. Welcome to our station's elementary school. Are you here for the cultural exchange presentation? The small humans all turned in unison, their eyes locking onto Zixarath with unsettling intensity. Several emitted high-pitched squeals of excitement. An alien, a real alien. One particularly loud small human exclaimed, pointing a stubby appendage directly at him. Children, remember our manners, the overseer. This, Miss Patel, chided. This is High Emissary Zixarath from the Evaluary Collective. Zixarath's diplomatic training momentarily failed him as horror set in. Children? Children? The Confederation intelligence briefings had mentioned human reproductive methods, but had glossed over the lengthy developmental phase. These weren't adult humans subjected to some bizarre imprisonment. They were immature specimens, and they were being held against their will in this educational facility, forced to perform repetitive tasks under the watchful eye of an authority figure. High Emissary, are you all right? You've gone quite yellow, Miss Patel asked, concern evident in her voice. Zixarath backed slowly toward the door, his mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. I must consult with my delegation immediately. This is unexpected. He turned and scuttled away with undiplomatic haste, leaving a classroom of confused third graders and their equally baffled teacher staring after him. Did I say something wrong? Asked the small boy with large glasses. Miss Patel shook her head. I don't think so, Jamal. I think the High Emissary just isn't used to children. That, as it turned out, was the understatement of the galactic century. Trelmach had never seen High Emissary Zix Arath in such a state. The normally composed diplomat burst into their private quarters, mandibles clicking wildly, all 8 limbs gesticulating in what could only be described as pure panic. They are monsters, Trelmach. Absolute barbaric monsters. Zix Arath shrieked, his exoskeleton now cycling through various shades of distress, yellow to orange to a sickly green. High Emissary, please calm yourself, Trelmach urged, offering a nutrient stick. What has occurred? The humans. They imprison their young. They force their offspring to endure confinement and mental labor. It's torture. Trelmach's compound eyes blinked rapidly in confusion. That cannot be correct, High Emissary. Our intelligence reports indicate humans have extensive protection protocols for their immature specimens. I saw it with my own optical receptors. Zix Arath jabbed a trembling appendage toward the door. Down the eastern corridor, dozens of small humans arranged in rows, forced to perform repetitive tasks while an overseer monitors their every movement. Some were restrained in seating apparatus. It was horrific. Perhaps there is some cultural misunderstanding. No. Zix Arath slammed an appendage down on the nutrient preparation surface. This is unacceptable. The Galactic Confederation cannot establish diplomatic relations with a species that subjugates its own offspring. We must confront them immediately. Before Trelmach could suggest a more measured approach, Zix Arath stormed out of their quarters, heading straight for the diplomatic conference room, where Commander Chen and her team awaited the continuation of negotiations. Zix Arath burst through the doors with such force that several human diplomats jumped in surprise. Commander Chen rose from her seat, concern evident on her face. High Emissary Zix Arath, is something the matter? The matter? Zix Arath's voice modulator nearly overloaded with indignation. You dared to present yourselves as a civilized species while committing atrocities against your own young. A confused murmur rippled through the human delegation. A tall man with silver-streaked hair, Dr. Jameson, if Zix Arath recalled correctly, leaned forward. High Emissary, I'm afraid we don't understand what you're referring to. Zix Arath's mandibles clacked in fury. Do not insult my intelligence with denials. I observe your educational facility with my own sensory apparatus. You force small humans to sit motionless for extended periods. You subject them to mental conditioning. You restrict their freedom of movement. Commander Chen and Dr. Jameson exchanged bewildered glances. High Emissary, are you referring to our station's elementary school? Commander Chen asked cautiously. Call it what you will. It is a prison for underdeveloped humans. Trelmach finally caught up, rushing into the room and positioning himself apologetically behind his superior. Perhaps we should allow the humans to explain their practices, High Emissary, he suggested quietly. Dr. Jameson cleared his throat. High Emissary Zix Arath, I assure you our educational facilities are not prisons. They are places of learning where our children develop the knowledge and skills necessary for adult life. Lies. Zix Arath's coloration deepened to an outraged purple. If they are not prisoners, why are they not permitted to leave? Why are they forced to remain seated? Why do they require an authority figure to monitor their activities? Because they're children, Commander Chen said simply, as if this explained everything. Did you capture human children as prisoners? You are insane. Zix Arath bellowed, his translator struggling to convey the full magnitude of his moral outrage. A younger female diplomat suddenly covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking in what appeared to be distress. It took Zix Arath a moment to realize she was actually laughing. I apologize, High Emissary, she said, composing herself with visible effort, but I believe we're experiencing a profound cultural misunderstanding. There is nothing to misunderstand about the imprisonment of juveniles. Zix Arath insisted, though a flicker of uncertainty had begun to creep into his righteous indignation. Commander Chen raised her hands in a placating gesture. High Emissary, perhaps we should discuss how Evalduri young develop compared to human children. I think you might find the differences illuminating. Zixarath's antenna twitched as he considered this. Finally, he gave a stiff nod. Very well. Enlighten me about your children. But be warned, the Confederation does not tolerate cruelty to sentient beings, regardless of their developmental stage. What followed would forever change the course of human-alien relations and challenge everything the Confederation thought they knew about the evolution of intelligence in the galaxy. Educational enlightenment. The diplomatic conference room had been hastily transformed into what the humans called a classroom setting, complete with visual aids projected onto the main screen. High Emissary Zixarath sat rigidly in a chair modified to accommodate his exoskeleton, all 8 eyes fixed on Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief xenobiologist and child development specialist, who had been summoned to explain this barbaric education concept. Let me get this straight, Zixarath interrupted, mandibles twitching with barely contained skepticism. You're telling me that human offspring emerge from their biological vessels as completely helpless, non-sentient life forms. Dr. Vasquez nodded patiently. Human babies are born with very limited capabilities, yes. They cannot walk, talk, feed themselves, or even control their own waste elimination for quite some time. And this helpless state lasts for how long? Zixarath asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Full physical and cognitive development takes approximately 18 to 25 Earth years, Dr. Vasquez replied. Zixarath emitted a high-pitched whistle that made several humans wince. 25 rotations around your star. That's preposterous. How has your species not gone extinct from predation? Commander Chen stifled what suspiciously sounded like a laugh. We protect and nurture our young while they develop, High Emissary. For 25 years, Zixarath's exoskeleton paled to an astonished white. The inefficiency is staggering. And you expect me to believe this? School is part of this development process. Dr. Jameson stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. Perhaps a comparison would help, High Emissary. How do young Evaldurians develop? Zixarath straightened proudly. Evalduri hatchlings emerge fully formed with complete innate knowledge downloaded from the genetic memory banks of our species. They require precisely 2 standard cycles to reach full size, during which they are kept in climate-controlled maturation chambers. They emerge as productive members of society, ready to fulfill their designated functions. The humans exchanged glances that Zixarath couldn't interpret. I see, Dr. Vasquez said carefully. So, Evalduri children are born with all the knowledge they will ever need. Of course, Zixarath replied. What other efficient method could possibly exist? Dr. Vasquez tapped on her data pad, and the large screen displayed an image of a human brain, followed by a time-lapse sequence showing its development from infancy to adulthood. High Emissary, human children are born with approximately 100 billion neurons, but relatively few connections between them. Over time, through experience and education, these connections form, creating the neural networks that allow complex thought, creativity, and problem-solving. Zixarath leaned forward, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his moral outrage. You mean they build their own neural pathways, without templates? Exactly, Dr. Jameson interjected. By age 3, a human child has formed about 1,000 trillion neural connections, more than they will have as adults. But that's inefficient, Zixarath protested, though with less conviction than before. Dr. Vasquez smiled. Actually, it's remarkably efficient for adaptation. As children grow, the connections they use are strengthened, while those they don't use are pruned away. This process, which we call experience-dependent plasticity, allows human brains to specialize based on their unique experiences and environments. Trelmach, who had been silent until now, suddenly chirped with interest. This would explain the remarkable adaptability of humans noted in our preliminary studies. Evalduri brains are perfect replications of the genetic template, with little variation between individuals, which is why this school exists. Zix Arath asked, his tone now more curious than accusatory. Commander Chen nodded. Education helps shape those neural connections. It provides experiences, challenges, and information that help children develop their unique potential. But the confinement, the regimentation, the authority figures. Zix Arath persisted. Let me show you something, Dr. Vask said, standing. If you'll follow me, High Emissary, I think a direct observation might be more illuminating than any explanation I could offer. The playground, as the humans called it, was a riot of color, sound, and movement that assaulted Zix Arath's senses from the moment they entered the large open chamber adjacent to the educational facility. Small humans darted in all directions, climbing on structures, swinging from apparatus, building with colored blocks, and engaging in what appeared to be simulated combat scenarios with soft projectiles. This is chaotic, Zix Arath observed, stepping back as a small human narrowly missed colliding with his lower limbs. We call it free play, Ms. Pottle explained, beaming at the scene. It's a crucial part of childhood development. Through play, children learn social skills, problem-solving, creativity, and physical coordination. A small human female with dark curly hair approached tentatively, staring up at Zix Arath with unabashed curiosity. Are you really from another planet? She asked, unfazed by his alien appearance. Before Zix Arath could formulate a diplomatic response, the child continued. Do you have children too? Do they go to school? What games do they play? Can they change colors like you? Sophia, Miss Patel interjected gently. Remember what we discussed about respecting personal space and asking one question at a time. The child, Sophia, nodded solemnly. Sorry, Ms. Patel. Sorry, Mr. Alien Ambassador. To Zix Arath's surprise, he found himself responding. We do not have children, as you understand them. Evalera Young emerged fully formed, with all knowledge pre-installed. Sophia's eyes widened. But how do they learn to make friends, or invent new things, or figure out what they like to do? Zix Arath's secondary brain mass pulsed with an unfamiliar sensation. They don't. Their functions are predetermined. Sophia frowned, clearly troubled by this concept. That sounds sad. Everyone should get to choose who they want to be. Before Zix Arath could respond, Sophia was called away by her peers to join some form of circular movement ritual involving rhythmic chanting. Out of the mouths of babes, Commander Chen murmured beside him. I beg your pardon. It's an old Earth expression. It means that children often speak simple truths that adults overlook. Zix Arath watched as the children organized themselves with minimal adult intervention, negotiating roles in their activities, resolving conflicts, and spontaneously creating new games when old ones lost their appeal. They're self-organizing, he observed with growing astonishment. Children are remarkably adept at creating their own social structures. Dr. Vasquez explained. What looks like chaos to an outside observer actually contains complex systems of rules, hierarchies, and cooperation that they develop themselves. But surely this play isn't their education. It's a crucial part of it, Dr. Jameson said. Structured learning in classrooms provides knowledge and skills, while play develops creativity, social intelligence, and problem-solving. Both are essential. A sudden commotion drew their attention. Two small males were engaged in a heated dispute over possession of a colorful construction toy. Aren't you going to intervene? Zix Arath asked Ms. Patel, who was observing the situation, but making no move to resolve it. Watch, she said simply. To Zix Arath's amazement, a third child stepped between the quarreling boys, proposed a solution involving taking turns, and facilitated a negotiation that resulted in both parties agreeing to collaborate on a joint construction project instead. They're resolving conflicts independently, Zix Arath muttered, mandibles clicking in contemplation. When possible, we let them work things out themselves, Miss Poddle explained. It's how they develop emotional regulation and conflict resolution skills. We step in when needed, but our goal is to teach them to manage their own relationships. Zixarath fell silent, his multiple brains processing this radical new understanding of development. In the Evoldery Collective, conflicts were unheard of. Each individual emerged with a perfect understanding of their place in the social order. There was no need for negotiation, compromise, or creative problem-solving, because there were never any problems that hadn't been anticipated and solved by the genetic programming. I think I'm beginning to understand, he said finally. Your educational facilities aren't prisons for your young. They're incubators for emergent intelligence. Dr. Vasquez smiled. That's a poetic way of putting it, High Emissary. But why the structure? The discipline? The restraint? He persisted. Balance, Commander Chen said. Freedom without guidance leads to chaos. Structure without freedom stifles development. Human education attempts to balance both. Would you like to see a more structured learning environment now? Dr. Vasquez suggested. Perhaps something closer to what you initially observed. Zixarath nodded, his scientific curiosity now fully engaged. Yes, I believe it would be most enlightening. In a classroom filled with what Ms. Patel identified as fifth graders, humans approximately 10 years into their developmental cycle, Zixarath observed a very different scene from both the rigid rows of his earlier misconception and the chaotic freedom of the playground. Students sat in small groups, engaged in animated discussion over what appeared to be some sort of problem-solving task. A human adult. Mr. Kaplan, he was introduced as, moved from group to group, occasionally offering guidance or asking questions, but primarily allowing the students to work through the challenges themselves. What are they doing? Zixarath asked, his voice lowered to avoid disrupting the class. It's a collaborative engineering project, Mr. Kaplan explained. They're designing water filtration systems using only the materials provided. It incorporates principles of physics, environmental science, and teamwork. Zixarath watched as the young humans debated approaches, tested hypotheses, failed, regrouped, and tried again. What struck him most was not their successes, but how they handled failures, with resilience and adaptation rather than distress. They seem pleased when their attempts fail, he observed, puzzled. Mr. Kaplan smiled. That's because they're learning that failure is part of the discovery process. Each failure gives them information they didn't have before. In the Evoldery Collective, failure is unknown, Zixarath admitted. Our genetic programming ensures perfect execution of predetermined functions. And innovation? Commander Chen asked quietly. How does your species advance technologically or culturally? Zixarath shifted uncomfortably. Advancements are incorporated into the genetic templates after they've been approved by the Evolutionary Council. It's a deliberate process, which explains why human technological development has outpaced most Confederation predictions. Trellmock observed, earning a sharp look from his superior. Forgive me, High Emissary, but our reports indicate humans have compressed what should have been a millennium of technological advancement into less than 2 centuries. A small human raised her hand, looking directly at Zixarath. Excuse me, Mr. Alien, but I have a question. Ms. Poddle started to intervene, but Zixarath waved her off. I am curious to hear it, he said to the child. If your babies are born already knowing everything, how do you discover new things? The child asked. And if everyone knows exactly the same stuff, doesn't that get boring? The simplicity of the question belied its profound implications. Zixarath found himself momentarily speechless, a first in his 4 centuries of diplomatic service. An excellent question, he finally acknowledged. In the Evoldery Collective, we value perfection and efficiency above discovery. Our society advances more slowly than yours, but without the messiness of trial and error. But the best part of science is the messiness. Another child exclaimed. That's when you find out cool stuff nobody expected. A chorus of agreement rose from the other students, along with a flurry of anecdotes about unexpected discoveries they had made through their messy experiments. As the humans prepared to move on to the next phase of their educational tour, Zix-Arath found himself lingering in the classroom, watching as the children enthusiastically demonstrated their filtration designs to one another. "High Emissary," Trellmuck inquired, noting his superior's unusual hesitation. "Is something troubling you?" Zix-Arath's exoskeleton had settled into a contemplative shade of blue. "Not troubling, Trellmuck. Intriguing. I am beginning to understand something about these humans that I suspect the Confederation has overlooked entirely." "What might that be, High Emissary?" Zix-Arath gestured toward the children, who were now collaboratively improving each other's designs without prompting from their teacher. "Their greatest strength isn't their technology or their resources or even their adaptability," he said softly. "It's their method of creating new minds. They don't replicate, they innovate. Each human child is an experiment in consciousness, with outcomes that cannot be predicted even by the children themselves." "That sounds inefficient," Trellmuck observed, echoing his superior's earlier criticism. "Perhaps," Zix-Arath conceded, "or perhaps efficiency isn't always the highest virtue." The implications of this realization continued to unfold in his mind as they proceeded to the final stage of their educational tour, one that would challenge the foundations of Evalderi philosophy even more profoundly. The music room hid Zix-Arath's auditory receptors like a physical force. Compared to the mathematical precision of Evalderi harmonic compositions, the sounds produced by the young humans were chaotic, imprecise, and yet somehow compelling. "This is our arts education program," Dr. Vasquez explained over the crescendo of what she called a student orchestra. "Music, visual arts, theater, dance, all crucial components of human development. You dedicate educational resources to entertainment?" Zix-Arath asked, genuinely puzzled. "Not entertainment, expression," corrected a tall human with vibrant plumage. "No, hair, dyed in multiple colors. I'm Ms. Yamamoto, the arts coordinator. The arts aren't frivolous luxuries. They're fundamental tools for developing critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and cultural understanding." Zix-Arath watched as a group of adolescent humans collaborated on a large mural, their movements seemingly haphazard yet ultimately contributing to a coherent whole. "There are no instructions," he noted. "How do they know what to create?" "They don't, not in advance," Ms. Yamamoto explained. "They're responding to a theme, unity in diversity, but interpreting it through their own perspectives and experiences." "But how do you evaluate their performance without objective criteria?" "Art isn't about replicating a predetermined correct result," Ms. Yamamoto said, her passion evident. "It's about the process of creation itself, about expressing something unique to each individual while also contributing to collective understanding." Before Zix-Arath could formulate a response, Commander Chen gently steered him toward a smaller room where a single human adolescent sat before a complex arrangement of black and white keys. "This is Ming," Commander Chen introduced them. "She's preparing for the Interplanetary Youth Piano Competition." The young human nodded respectfully to the alien delegation, then turned her attention back to the instrument. What followed left Zix-Arath's neural pathways struggling to process the sensory input. The sounds that emerged from the instrument were mathematically complex yet emotionally resonant in a way that Evalderi music never attempted to be. The human's slender digits moved with precision that would have impressed even the most exacting Evalderi engineer. But there was something more, a quality that Zix-Arath struggled to define. When the performance concluded, Zix-Arath found himself momentarily disoriented. "That was unexpected," he managed finally. "I detected at least 17 variations from what I assume is the standard execution of this piece, yet none seemed to be errors." Ming smiled. "They're interpretive choices. The composer provides the framework, but each pianist brings their own understanding to the piece. You modify the composition, deliberately." Of course, Ming said, as if this were the most natural thing in the universe. Otherwise, why have human performers at all? Machines could execute the notes with perfect accuracy, but they can't interpret the emotion behind them. Emotion, Zixarath repeated, the concept simultaneously familiar and alien. Evolurians experienced emotions, of course, but they were regulated, predictable responses to stimuli, not creative forces to be channeled into expression. As they left the music room, Zixarath found himself uncharacteristically silent, his multiple brains buzzing with connections and implications he had never before considered. High Emissary, Commander Chen inquired gently. You've been quiet. I hope our educational facilities have addressed your concerns. Zixarath's exoskeleton had settled into a deep, thoughtful purple, a color rarely seen among his kind. Commander Chen, Dr. Vasquez, esteemed educators, he began formally. I wish to offer my profound apologies for my earlier misinterpretation. It is clear that what I perceived as imprisonment is in fact something far more remarkable, a deliberate nurturing of emergent consciousness unlike anything in the Confederation's experience. Apology accepted, High Emissary, Commander Chen said with a warm smile. Cultural misunderstandings are inevitable in first contact situations. This is more than a misunderstanding.